I remember the results coming in. Well, it took some time for the results to come in, but Buttigieg ended up winning a lot of those rural counties in Iowa. I mean, I guess he was the new kind of exciting thing for some people that year, but it sounds like that kind of jives with what you're saying, that Bernie didn't go to some of these more rural places as much as he could have.
By the way, for the record, we won Iowa.
Yeah.
Pete did not win Iowa. Hell no. And yeah, no, if Bernie would have came here more, I think that we definitely would have performed better. We would have won with a larger margin.
Yeah, well, you were in Iowa at the time. I was up in New Hampshire, and we were having our watch party, obviously, and just watching all this play out and just feeling the mood of the room just gradually, like the excitement just leave our bodies as it became clear that like it was just a clusterfuck. And I mean, and it seemed like every candidate was trying to steal the spotlight for themselves and come up and make a speech on election. I can only imagine what was the reaction of people in Iowa when this turned out to be such a clusterfuck on caucus night.
Sure. So I had just gotten off of I was at one of the precincts in my turf observing the caucus going on, and I came out of my caucus pissed off, extremely pissed off, because Bernie was one vote away from being viable to receive delegates from that caucus site, and Andrew Yang's group was not viable. They only had 4 people. They would have taken us over the top, and there were folks that wanted to come over to Senator Sanders' side on the second vote, but the observer that was there for Andrew Yang was on the phone with someone, and as soon as he got off the phone, he said, okay, by you folks showing up here, you showed that Andrew is your candidate, and your candidate is asking you to disperse yourselves among all of the other viable groups except for Senator Sanders. That was directive that came from whoever this organizer was on the phone with. And so I got out of that caucus extremely pissed, went to the after party, and the same thing. Everybody was excited, looked like Bernie was going to win. And then 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, we still didn't have any kind of conclusive results, which was the direct fault of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, for getting involved in our caucuses, and just a lot of other clusterfuck that happened. We were going to have virtual caucuses where people could cast their vote online. That was nixed at the last second. It was said that the DNC was not going to accept that, so it transitioned to a satellite caucus, which people thought, oh, that's great. People can caucus right at their workplace. I told one of the 1st District Democratic Party organizers, I said, you show me one fucking McDonald's that's going to allow for people to caucus in their lobby, and I'll eat my sock. So, working class folks, the satellite caucuses in Iowa did not benefit, but it did benefit nursing homes, and it did benefit assisted living homes and people that were going to generally vote for the more conservative candidate, which would be Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris. So the DNC really made Iowa a clusterfuck.
It became clear to me that like everyone involved just like was determined that Sanders was not going to get the narrative of getting a W from the Iowa caucuses. And I think by the time everything was counted, and by the time some of those satellite caucuses were counted, it was even looking like by the New York Times' estimates that it was going to be official, Bernie would narrowly pull out a win. But by that point, of course, everyone was talking about New Hampshire. And we lost the narrative of having a win on caucus night. And
the mainstream media was very effective at tempering down narratives to the point where at the very least people saw it as a wash. And This whole thing with the app that didn't work and everything, it was okay, well, I guess nobody gets Iowa because Bernie got it, nobody gets it.
Right. The app that Pete Buttigieg funded.
Yeah, that all these, ex-Obama types, right? Wasn't it? I'm pretty sure it's David Plouffe was like one of the investors in this thing. And they made this app for $60,000, rolled it out with like practically no beta testing. I mean, the whole thing was fucked from the top down. And the only way to either explain it is it was a grift operation where, this group shadow charged the DNC through the ass for making this app and spent nothing on actually making it and pocketed the difference. Or B, they wanted to actually mess up Iowa in this way to prevent a Sanders win, which was looking probable. Or C, both of those things. I mean, at any rate, what happened, right? Bernie didn't get Iowa, didn't get a decisive win there. And the insiders who arranged the app that enabled that outcome made a whole bunch of money. So as far as they're concerned, win-win, right?
It was set up to fail from the beginning, considering the fact that a lot of the regulators of these caucuses are older people that are not as technologically adept as some of us young folks, because a lot of us young folks were working during the caucuses. We didn't even get to participate.
I'm convinced that it was planned. I mean, you can't tell. I mean, I think people involved with this thing, they're smart enough to know about how much time they need to test this app and how things are going to play out and how they needed to prepare. And I think it was the plan that if Bernie was too close to
Honestly,
winning,
John,
that they could just shit on the narrative and make it a wash, essentially. I mean, incidentally, it's what happened in Bolivia. I mean, the election with Evo there in 2019, it's just you muddy the narrative from the election long enough that you turn it into a wash and you just allow your preferred narrative to play out.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but I don't think it's necessarily the case. I can't discount the possibility of a shitty outcome being designed, but these people were also just looking to make a buck and are in an environment where everyone is doing a shitty job and making money. That's been the Democratic Party's MO for a while now. Just,
We'll let you cast the tie-breaking vote here. Did they just fail to plan, or did they plan to fail?
In my opinion, they planned to fail. And the reason, maybe I'm a little bit biased about that. I was one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit against the DNC in 2017 after WikiLeaks released the DNC emails showing the corruption that went on behind the scenes, the fact that the powers of the DNC, the fundraising powers were, and pretty much all the operational powers were forfeited over to Secretary Clinton's campaign before the first vote was even cast in the primary. And in the court proceedings that happened, the defense for the DNC came out and said, look, we're a private organization. They said, we can go into and this is paraphrasing. Yeah, they said we can go into the back room of a restaurant with cigars and whiskey like the old days and decide who the nominee is. We're not constrained or confined to the will of our constituents. We're not bound by any kind of federal election law. So, they can fix it and it's completely legal.
Amazing to be that audacious in a courtroom about how corrupt you are. Yeah, I remember that moment. That was pretty wild. I'd forgotten about it until you brought it up.
This is democracy in America. Two major parties who effectively monopolize the game, who think that they are entitled to choose who their candidates are and who we get to choose between. People shouldn't feel shame in feeling as conspiratorial, I think, as they want about the Democratic Party. Because as you said, David, we saw from the WikiLeaks emails, how they feel about Bernie, how they feel about this kind of burgeoning left-wing movement within the party.
But what that also showed, I'm glad you bring up the WikiLeaks email, because they prove what you guys are talking about, but they also prove what I'm talking about. There were so many things in the Podesta emails that were just the logistics of grift. Hey, can you get my buddy a job? Hey, my friend's kid needs an internship. When you're putting people in positions of consequence in places that matter, that eventually bites the institution in the ass because they've grifted themselves into ineffectiveness.
Yeah, that's part of it, but it's I remember in New York, it was fairly explicit. They had this illegal purge of the voting rolls. Maybe you remember.
Oh, I was one of them, man.
Yeah. Well, you weren't able to vote that year.
In 2016, I could only vote in the general. I tried to vote in the primary, and they told me I had switched to vote by mail, which I had done no such thing.
Yeah, it was determined eventually to be an illegal purge of voting rolls. They did this right before the primary between Bernie and Hillary in 2016 in New York State, because I think they did it as an insurance policy, right? They didn't want Bernie to rack up votes with all these young people in Brooklyn. That was their nightmare, was that Bernie was going to turn things around there. And I think people should have no shame in being as conspiratorial and as pessimistic about the Democratic Party as they want. If it is going to really become a tool for the working class, it's going to have to be lobotomized from top to bottom. Either that, or we will have to have another party at some point. But the party is so institutionally opposed to anyone who's genuinely on the left, as opposed to them taking power, I think.